Hi Kingfishers! You might be thinking, this doesn't sound like Mr. Carter. Well, it's not. Do you recognise my voice? Is it me, Mrs. Mitchell? No. Is it Mrs. Butler? No. Is it Miss Stewart? No, it's me, Mrs. Jones. I hope you're all well. Unfortunately, Mr. Carter's still poorly, so this week I'm going to be teaching your maths. Please still send your work to Miss Stewart's. She can review all the wonderful work that you're doing, and I shall look out for some really good examples on the class page. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at fractions. Those of you who I taught last year will remember I absolutely love fractions, so I'm really excited to be able to teach you this week. Today we are going to be learning to define the term equivalent fraction, so to be able to know what that means. And we need to be able to remember what that means for the work that's going to build on that this week. So by the end of today's lesson, you need to be able to explain what a fraction is and trying to remember and recall that from last year. You need to be able to define, which means say what something means. Define the term equivalent fraction. So by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to tell me what equivalent fraction means. And you need to be able to list fractions that are equivalent to each other. So for most of you, this will be revision from last year today. So what is a fraction? A fraction is when we split a whole into equal parts. So here's my whole pizza, that's one whole. And I might decide to split that into two equal parts. Here's one part and here's another part. You will be able to see that I've split that into half. Now half means that I've split the whole into two equal parts and I've got one of them. So it might be that, lucky me, I get to eat this half of the pizza. And that's the half that I've got, and I might give the other half away. I could split the whole into quarters by splitting it into 4 equal parts. Now remember, fractions have to be split into equal parts. So if I had one of those pieces, let's say I've got this piece of the pizza, I've split the whole into 4 equal parts and I've got one of them. If I was lucky enough to have 2 of the equal parts, then I would write the fraction as I've split the whole into 4 equal parts and I've got 2 of them. So that's 2 out of 4, 2 quarters. I could split this chocolate bar into 8 equal parts. Can you see I've got 8 equal segments of that pizza, chocolate bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I got to eat 3 of those, then I've split the whole into 8 equal parts and I've got 3 of them. So I've got 3 out of 8. We call that 3/8. So let's remind ourselves what a numerator and denominator are. The denominator in a fraction is this number, the bottom one. The denominator tells us how many parts the whole has been split into. So in this case, we've split the whole chocolate bar into 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the denominator tells us how many parts the whole has been split into. The numerator is the top number. The numerator tells us how many parts of the whole we've got. So we've got 3. So we've got 3 out of 8 pieces that make the whole. Now the whole doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be one chocolate bar, one pizza, one cake. It could be a group of objects, a group of people, group of animals. It could be any group of things. So imagine this is Kingfisher's class. Imagine I've got 12 children. I could split this whole group of children into three groups. So this is my whole, the 12, and I could split them into 3 groups. Here are my 3 groups. So you can see I've split my whole into 3 equal groups. So my denominator is 3. Bottom number, the denominator is 3. If I'm talking about one of those groups, then my numerator will be 1 because I've got 1 out of the 3 groups. I've got 1 out of 3, and we call that 1/3. If I was talking about 2 of the groups, then my numerator would change because I've no longer got 1 out of the 3 groups. I've no longer got 1/3. Instead, I have got 2. So my numerator now becomes 2. 2/3. 2 out of 3. And we call that fraction 2/3. So you might remember from last year where we had straws in the classroom, and I asked you to split and cut each straw into 10 equal pieces. So I asked you what the denominator would be if we're splitting a whole straw, one whole, into 10 equal pieces. What would the denominator be? That's right, it would be 10. So if I roughly split the straw into 10 equal pieces, some of you last year got a ruler out to check that it was equal, but for the purpose of this video, I will just split it roughly. Okay, so I've got 10 pieces. I've cut my straw into 10 pieces. They should be equal. As you can see, they're not as equal as they could be, but in order to make it perfectly equal, I would get a ruler out like we did last year and divide that by 10. So here are my 10 equal pieces that make my whole straw. So if I put those back together again, I would have my one whole straw. So if I had 3 of those pieces, what would my numerator be? That's right, it'd be 3. So the fraction would be 3 out of 10, which I call 3/10. If I had 5 of those pieces, then my numerator would be 5. So it's 5 out of 10, and the name of that fraction is 5/10. Now you might remember as well last year when I said to you, well, here's one straw, here are my tenths. What would you have to do to create a fraction with the denominator of 100? And you said we'd either have to split this straw and cut it into 100 equal pieces. And most of you had this reaction. But you did it. You split the whole into 100 equal pieces. Some of you said we wouldn't have to, well, we could split this whole into 100 equal pieces so that you've split the whole into 100. Or you could take one of your tenths and split that into 10 equal pieces. And if you did that for all of your tenths, you would then have 100 equal pieces that still make the one whole straw. So imagine that these are my hundredths. What would my fraction be? How many pieces do I have out of 100? That's right, it's 11. 11 out of 100. Out of 100. And we call that fraction 11 hundredths. Okay, so now we've revised our fraction learning. Let's look at what equivalent fraction means. Again, some of you might remember this from last year, but we need to revise this today so that we can build upon that learning throughout the rest of the week. So if we go back to our pizzas, here I have split the whole into 2 equal pieces. If I've got one of those pieces, so I've got this one, then I've split my whole into 2 equal parts and I've got one of them. So I've got 1/2 of the pizza. In this pizza, I've split the whole into 4 equal parts. So my denominator will be 4. Now, if I've got 2 of those, my numerator will be 2 because I've got 2 out of the 4 equal pieces. Can you see that 1/2 and 2/4 is exactly the same amount? And that's what equivalent fraction means. It means the same. Equal means the same. Equivalent means the same. So an equivalent fraction is a fraction that might look different, but it's the same. It's the same amount. Just here is a fraction wall. Most of you will have seen a fraction wall before. I know we used it last year in Badger's class. So in our fraction wall, you can see here's one whole, and the whole has been split into different pieces. So in this line, the whole's been split into 2 equal pieces. So you've got 1/2 here and another half here. In this line, it's been split into 3 equal pieces. So you've got 1/3, another third, and another third. And in this line, it's been split into 4 equal pieces. So in each piece, you've got 1/4, 1 out of 4 equal pieces. And that carries on into 5, 6, 8, and 10, our tenths that we've been talking about. So in our fraction wall, you can see some fractions that are the same. Now, we just discovered that 1/2 is the same as, it's the same size as 2/4. You might also be able to see that 2/3 is the same as 4/6. Can you see how that's the same size? 2/3 and 4/6. So we would say that 2/3 thirds is equivalent to 4/6. Split. So now it's your turn. I want you to go onto the interactive fraction wall that I'll put the link onto your class page. And I want you to find as many equivalent fractions, so fractions that are the same amount, and write them in your learning journal. Let me show you again how you might do this. Here is the fraction wall that you will find on your internet browser when you click the link on the class page. If you click this button up here, it will turn the fraction wall in to tell you the fractions, and it will colour code it as well. So now you can see some fractions that are equivalent. If you want to hide some of the fractions to make it easier to see which ones are the same, then you would just click on the fraction that you want to hide. So perhaps I want to look at 1/2 and 2/4. I could just click on some of the fractions around it just so that I can see whether or not they are actually the same amount. Yes, they are. You can see they're exactly the same amount. 1/2, and I've got 1/4 here and another 1/4 here, so I've got 2/4 in total. You could do it another way where you start with the fraction wall blank by clicking the blank button at the top there, and then looking for sort of lines that are the same. So here I can see there's a line here that are the same, which means these 3 bars, all of this, must be the same fraction. So then I can click on it to find out what it is. 1/2, 2/4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 4/8. It tells you as well over here what fraction you've made. We've got 4 out of 8 pieces. We've got 4/8. And here in this bar, we've got 2 out of the 4 pieces. So it's 2/4. And here we've got 1 out of 2. So it's 1/2. So I'd like you to find as many equivalent fractions from that fraction wall that you can, and you would write it with the equal sign, because the equal sign means the same as, so it's a useful sign to use. So you could do 2/4 equals 4/8. Once you've found as many as you can, or your sort of time's finished and you need to move on to something else, then send a picture to Miss Stewart, and I'm sure Miss Stewart will post some fantastic examples on the class page for me to have a look at. Well done, Kingfishers. I'm sure that you'll do really, really well with this. This is really good revision from what you've learned before. Don't forget at the end of the lesson to assess against your success criteria. So remember, we wanted to learn what the term equivalent fraction actually means. So remember, once you've finished your task, you need to tell Miss Stewart in your email or write it on your learning journal so that it will show it in the photograph as well. You need to be able to explain what a fraction is. So it'd be good to write down what a fraction is and explain what the term equivalent fraction means. And obviously your task will be listing fractions that are equivalent to each other. So you could write SC3 next to that. Well done, Kingfishers. I can't wait to see your work. Bye.